Okay, we've got our water tower kit, which I'm going to set to the side here for the moment because I want to talk to you briefly about the types of tools you need to assemble this. Now, you're going to need something like this first. This is a hobby knife. It's similar to our utility knife that we used on building the rest of the model railroad, but this is specifically made for doing modeling work, and it's got a very fine little blade on it that is good for making delicate little cuts. You can buy one of these at a hobby shop, basically anywhere you could get your water tower kit from. Another tool I've got sitting here, and this is not necessary for the project that we're working on today, but it's a really handy thing to have, especially if you're going to build more models in the longer run, and this is called a sprue nipper. And it is actually just a very sharp pair of flush cutting pliers, and we'll use that to remove some of the parts from their plastic sprues when we get into the kit. And there's one more basic tool that we're going to need, which actually I don't have here on my workbench. We have to go get it. We'll be right back. Jenny, can I borrow your emery board?
Sure.
Thanks. This is what we need. Okay, I took Jenny's emery board, but essentially this is a sanding stick, and it's a really useful modeling tool for removing little bits and pieces of unwanted plastic from the parts as we assemble the model. To glue our model together, we can't use just ordinary white glue like you would for crafts. You're going to need a special type of glue for that. Now, there are a couple of choices here, so let me explain what they are. The first two are called styrene cements. I have a gel-type styrene cement, which is fairly thick, and then I also have a liquid plastic styrene cement, which is good for the type of work we're going to do today. It's nice and thin, and it can seep into all of the joints, making for a solid bond. Now, your third choice here is actually good old-fashioned super glue, or also sometimes called CA. This glues parts together simply by making a bond between the two surfaces. It doesn't melt anything. CA will work just fine on a plastic kit like we're working with here. However, it can make the joints fairly brittle and they'll come apart more easily. So we're not going to use that one today. We're not going to use the gel either. We're going to go with liquid styrene cement. So let's open the kit box and see what's inside. Okay, let's open up our box and see what's inside. We have an assortment of plastic parts. These happen to be molded in nice colors. Eventually you can paint your model if that's what you choose, but what we're looking for are these guys right here, the instructions. Okay, now that we've got the instructions laid out, let's take a quick look at them so you can see what you've got. They have some very nice exploded diagrams here to show you how all the pieces go together, and they also have a list of all of the steps that you will need in order to assemble the kit. Now, the first part of our project here is actually going to revolve around figure 1, which is assembling the base legs for our water tower. Now, if you notice, our diagram here has little numbers on it. This is part number 1, you've got part number 2, part number 3. And that actually corresponds to the pieces themselves. If you look at this plastic sprue with all our leg parts on it here, we've got part number 1 is molded into the back of this piece here. Part number 3, however, actually is molded on a little tab right on the edge of the sprue. So now that we know we need parts 1, 2, and 3 for our first step, we can actually cut them out. Set our instructions aside, and I'll show you how to do that with a hobby knife. Now, you need to exercise caution when cutting parts out because sometimes pieces need to stay attached to the part. For instance, this little nub right here is actually the mounting point for this post to go into the next part. So we're going to set our hobby knife in next to it, between it and the sprue, and just apply a little downward pressure, and the plastic is soft enough it should just separate easily. There we go. There's one. We'll come in here and do this one next. Now take a look right here where we've made our cuts. You can see that there's just a little uneven or rough plastic on that edge. And so this is where we're going to use Jenny's emery board and come in and just very gently sand that off so it's smooth. And clean it up. You can feel it with your finger too, especially if you can't see it all that well. Sometimes you can't. There we go. Nice and clean. We'll do the other ones. There's 2. 3, a little more support there, and 4. Okay, those parts are nice and smooth. You don't need to watch me cut out the rest of the pieces, so I'm going to cut the rest of the parts out of our sprues that we need for our leg assembly, and then we'll come back and put them together. Okay, we have all of the parts for our first assembly cut out. We've got 2 part 1s, 2 part 2s, and 2 part 3s. Now before we begin putting this together, I want to make sure, based on the instructions, that we know which way is down or where the bottom of this is going to be. And if you see this little angled tab on the bottom of what's called the frost box in the middle of our water tower support, that is the bottom of it. So we need to make sure that's down, and then if you see our little side walls here for the frost box, those have angled tabs that point downward too. So that's how they all match up. So the first step here is to actually take one of our side walls and glue it into the frost box on one of our main supports for the water tower. So I've got it set into its little notch. Now I'll take some of the liquid plastic cement, and then I'm just going to bring it along the inside of my kit here and just run it along the edge. We're going to probably put a couple of applications because this stuff evaporates very quickly, but we want to run it into the joint to make it solid. Now it won't firm up completely right away, but because it melts the plastic, it'll actually grab hold fairly quickly. So you can see we can leave it standing. Let's do the other side. So we'll take the second frost wall box part, make sure the angled tabs are down, denoting the bottom. We'll set it in the slot, and then we'll come back with our liquid styrene cement and run it along the inside. You want to avoid getting this material on the outside of the model where people will see it, because it can damage the details. And there we go. So now we're going to put our side supports in before we put the other piece together here, and I want to show you that this has got some detail on it. It's got a little wood grain in the plastic, and it's got this nut bolt washer detail here where there's a bolt that holds this thing together. But if you flip it over, you can see that the back side, smooth plastic. We don't want that side out because all your detail will be lost. So we're going to put this side up, and there are 2 little slots in our original leg assembly here that will sit in like that. And we can just come back in and put some liquid plastic cement on the inside corners of that to tack it in place. Let's do the other one. So making sure our detail is on the outside, we slip it into the slot. Just hold it gently while we flow a little plastic cement in between. Okay, those pieces are in place. Let's glue our last part on. Now we need to make sure that there's our angled tab. So that's the bottom, and the angled tabs are all on this side. So actually I'm going to turn it around. Everybody oriented the proper way. Now we just need to slip it on. Flip it up to make sure that all of our parts, see this guy here? He didn't get into the slot. So we're just going to have to bend things over a little bit to make sure it lines up. So all the pieces are where they should be. And now we can glue it together. We'll work from the top first. Get the opposite corner here. Styrene cement there. And now we can set the frost box together. Since I can't get the brush all the way down in there, we're just going to go part way on this side. So there's 1 and 2. And we can flip it over and do the other side. So we'll start in our corner again. There's 1. And the other corner here is 2. And then we need to do the walls for the frost box one last time, getting the other half that we couldn't get before. Okay, our first piece has had enough time to dry, so we can start the next part, which is actually to add more of the leg assemblies that come off the side of it. So I've got 4 part 4s on my tabletop here, and I've got 2 more part 3s which act as the cross braces. Now there's no right or left to these, which is nice, so it doesn't necessarily matter which pieces you have, but I've flipped them over. Now I'm going to take my cross brace here, and again keeping my detail to the outside, set it into the slots and glue it in place with some liquid plastic cement. Cross brace into the slots and apply the glue. Okay, while that one is firming up, we'll take the first one we did and we'll put the next piece on. Just make sure one tab is in first. You might have to apply just a little bit of pressure to get this to slip into place here. And then we just come in with a little liquid plastic cement again at the top and at the bottom. Set that one aside and do the next one. Okay, let's bring back our main leg assembly now. We'll set it down on our tabletop here, and again, there's no up or down on these secondary assemblies, so we'll slip them into the slots on one side, make sure everything lines up the way it should. Our liquid plastic cement and do one side, and I'm going to put a little more on this side too. Now we have to put on our last piece. For this we'll have to just stand it up because we're running out of ways to lay it down. So we'll put the top in. Yep. That tab. One next to it. Glue. Okay, now we don't want that to dry too long because we actually need it to be a little bit pliable yet for the next step, and that is to actually attach it to its base. So we'll cut the base out from its sprue. And then we can take the whole assembly and just very carefully line the pegs on the bottom of the posts up with their footings. Okay, it takes a little shifting to get things into place, but we've got it seated now nicely into its base. And now we can flip it over. And because these holes are open, we can apply the cement from the bottom, which makes it a lot easier. Just put a drop in each. All right, with the adhesive all into the bottom now, we'll just flip it over one last time. I'm going to just make a spot check, and yeah, see these guys popped up a little bit, so I'm actually just going to put a little pressure on top of it to make sure it all glues down. We'll give it a few seconds to firm up here, and then we can move on to the top. Okay, let's set that aside. The next step, according to the instructions, is to put the deck on top, and this is the part that supports the water tank. So this piece here is the deck. Using our hobby knife, we'll just cut it out of its sprue. Like that. Set that aside. We'll use our sanding stick again. You can see these rough little edges here. We need to clean those up. Okay, with the cut marks cleaned up, we can now attach this to our leg assembly. One thing we have to watch out for. See these two little holes in the base plate? That's where our ladder assembly later needs to go, and in order to make sure that that lines up properly with the rest of the tank, we need to be aware of this right here. This is the hole for the spout, where the pipe comes out from the bottom of the tank and the water can go to the locomotive. So we need to make sure that the hole for the spout actually goes in this location right here for everything to line up properly. So that's my spout hole, there's my ladder hole. We'll just set our top on and we'll glue it together. All right, with the glue on those, I really need to put some pressure on this for a bit in order for it to stay together. So that's where some rubber bands are going to come in handy. I'm just going to carefully put one over the center, going that direction. We'll come back. And I'll put one over the center going this direction too. Just to put some pressure on it to make sure everything stays square while that hardens up. We'll give that a little bit. To dry. So the next step is to work on putting the halves of our tank together. I've got two pieces here, and they are tapered, so it's next to impossible to put these together incorrectly, but they've got two little tabs that fit together like that, and we'll put some styrene cement in and glue it up. So with the halves together, we'll put the liquid plastic cement on each of the joints on the inside first, where the peg fits into the other section. And then I'm going to run it down the seam too to make an extra tight bond. We'll flip it over and do the other side. Again, keeping some pressure with my fingers to hold the parts together. Okay, and much like the rest of the assembly, I'm going to put a rubber band around this too, just to make sure that it's nice and tight and has time to dry without splitting apart. We're going to take a little break, which means that you can go off and get something to drink and relax a little, and we'll come back in a couple of minutes and put all the final pieces together. Our tank is gluing up nicely. We'll set that aside for the moment. We need to do the roof next. So I will use my hobby knife again and cut the roof out of the sprue. And last but not least, 3. Just clean up a couple of those edges. So if we flip our roof over, you can see right here, we've got a tab on the inside, and that is to line it up so that it sits properly on the tank to make sure the spout, the ladder, everything else winds up where they should when we put the final model together. So you can see that I've got the same or corresponding spot on my water tank here. So we'll just set the roof on there, line it up, and now we'll glue it down. This is going to be a little trickier because we actually have to work from inside the tank to get this to work. Okay, our leg assembly has had plenty of time to sit in the rubber bands, and it looks like it's solidified nicely. So what we'll do is we'll put the tank on next. Fortunately, the tank has this little centering notch on the bottom side of it, and this little notch actually corresponds to this tab on the top of our tank frame or our tank support. So all we have to do is make sure those things line up, and everything should be exactly where it needs to be to put it together. We'll flip it over and we'll apply some liquid styrene cement to the underside to make sure that it all locks down. And we'll just carefully work all the way around the bottom of the tank, putting a drop of liquid styrene cement at each joist where it supports the tank on top of the legs. And take that last rubber band off. The tank is now firmly attached to the top of the supports for our water tower. So the next step is to install the ladder, and we will begin by cutting that out of the sprue. Okay, our ladder is cleaned up, so we are ready to add it to our assembly. Remember those 2 little holes that we looked at in the water tank's base earlier? Well, that's where the feet of the ladder go in, and you can tell which are the feet because this is the end that has the longer pieces to it. Now, you also need to notice that on the tank we have these 2 little holes at the top under the edge of the roof. That's where the top of the ladder will go in, so those are our gluing points on each side. So let's get our ladder in position. We'll slip the feet of the ladder into the holes like that. Set it up. Now the ladder is a little bit short until we slide it up into position on the top of the tank. So I'm going to put a little styrene cement at the base first, just to tack those bottom pieces of the ladder in. And we'll put a little cement at the top to lock those in as well. Now the ladder is a long and delicate part, and so I'm also going to put just a little dot of cement at the middle section here, right at the bottom of the tank. Just to give it something else to anchor it down in case it gets bumped. And we can set that aside to dry for a little bit. Our next step is to put in the spout assembly, and this is the last piece we need to build. All right, we have several parts here for our spout assembly. We have this long piece here, which actually will go up the side of our water tank. We have the spout itself, which actually comes in 2 pieces. And then we have the spout pipe, which is all the way over here on the other side. That actually plugs into the bottom of our tank, and our spout is built around it. So we're going to cut all those parts out, clean them up, and then we can glue them together. So the first thing we're going to do is take the supply pipe for the water tower itself. And you can see on the base of the tower inside the lattice work here for the legs is a hole that actually plugs into. So we'll slide it in, kind of plugs itself in place, and then we're going to put just a drop of liquid styrene cement in there to hold it. Slip that right in. The next part to glue on is the spout rigging. It has 2 little press fit tabs on the back here that we're just going to put a drop of glue on either side, like that. And then they fit into the slots on the side of the tank. And then our spout pipe, which we just put on earlier, comes right through the bottom, like so. Now I'm also going to come back and put some glue on the inside of the rigging here against the tank just to keep it all locked down nice and neatly in place. All right, so the beam is in place. Our next step is to take this little guy here. This is the spout lever, and we're going to glue it to the roof. It's got 2 holes in the roof up here where it goes. Put a drop of liquid plastic cement on it and slip it into place. Okay, that comes to the spout itself, our final piece. So the spout comes in 2 pieces, and it has these little pins on it that actually line up in holes on the other half of the spout. All we need to do is put a drop or 2 of styrene cement onto one half and press the other half on top of it, and it should be ready to install. The spout halves glued together and cleaned up a little bit with our sanding stick. The final step is to actually put them onto the support beam. So what we're going to do is first of all slip the support beam off the supply pipe. You can see it leaves this little keyhole shaped space here, and the end of the spout itself has a sort of T assembly. If we turn sideways, put it into the keyhole and line it back up, it'll go in there so we can move it. We just lift the supply pipe back up into the keyhole so everything goes back together and our spout can move into position. The final thing I need to do is just put a couple of drops of liquid plastic cement on the support beam and on the supply pipe, and everything will be locked into place. And then we can take the model back over to our layout and install it. All right, we've got our water tank. Here's our layout. I've already got a spot here that I had prepared for it, and you can see that the water tank will go in there just fine. So I'm going to put a little latex caulk down to glue it in place. Make sure it's in position and press it down. And there we go. Our water tank is now part of our layout. So if you want to have even more fun with your family layout project, go ahead and build your own models from plastic kits. It will give your railroad a unique touch.